So the question is, who is the observer? And who is the censor that says, this I will do, this I won't do. This is right and this is wrong. This path I will take and I won't tread that path. I'll be a pacifist with regard to this war, but I have other favorite wars. I will follow this leader and not that leader. I believe in this and not in that. I will hold this prejudice and reject that. Knowing, if you have observed yourself, that you are a fragmented human being. And therefore, being fragmented, contradictory, living in constant conflict, and knowing this conflict, one fragment of this many, many fragments takes charge, becomes the authority, the censor, and his observation must inevitably be contradictory. Right? I hope you're following all this. If one fragment, one part of you assumes the authority of the analyzer over the other fragments, why has he assumed that authority? And can he, one fragment, analyze the rest of the other fragments? You're following all this? See how dreadfully complex it has all become. Whether you are analyzed by a professional or you analyze yourself, it is still the same pattern. So it's very important to find out how to observe all these many contradictions which make up our life. How to observe the whole of those fragments without another fragment taking place. But this is very important to find out, because as long as there is contradiction, division in oneself, there must be conflict, there must be violence, which expresses itself in the world, outside, in society. And as long as this fragmentation exists within one, there can be no peace. And a man who really deeply wants to understand and live a peaceful life, a life of love, must understand this question completely. Therefore, it's a very serious matter. Not just an afternoon's listening to a few words. We are dealing with the whole problem of existence. And it's only the mind that can give serious attention to this, that is able to resolve it. So it's very important, imperative, that one understand this question. How do you observe? Do you observe yourself as an outsider, as a censor, saying this is right, this is wrong, justifying, condemning, approving, storing up? And if you do, there is a contradiction, and therefore conflict, and therefore violence. How do you observe? Do you observe through an image? When you observe a tree, do you observe with knowledge of that tree? The knowledge that separates you from the tree, divides you, brings about a space between you and the tree. How do you observe? How do you observe your wife and your husband? Or your girl or boy? How do you observe them? Watch yourself, sir. Please do it as we are talking. Don't make notes. Don't fiddle around with tape recorder. But watch it. How do you look at another? Don't you look at another through the image you have built about the other? The image that you have been building for many years, or perhaps 2 days. And the image becomes the observer. Right? Are you following this? So, the image, or through the image you look. So the censor, the observer, is one of the fragments, and that censor has an image of what is right and what is wrong, what should be done, what should not be done, because he is still functioning as a fragment. So the question from this arises whether one can observe without any fragment. To see you, see oneself, see the world without fragmentation at all. And what brings about fragmentation? Not only in oneself, but also in the world of which one is. What brings it about? Why is one fragmented? Why are there contradictory desires? Right? Now, why is one violent? Which is part of contradiction. There are many causes why human beings are violent. Lack of physical space, human beings who have evolved from the animal, and the animals are very aggressive, and people love being aggressive. Feeling inferior, and they want to be superior. And so on. There are many causes. And most of us spend our time discussing the causes, explaining the causes. Each professor, each specialist, each writer, according to his conditioning, explains the causes. Volumes are written why human beings are violent. But at the end of the volume, human beings still remain violent. So, the description is not the described, and therefore is of very little value. You know why you are violent very well. You haven't got to spend years trying to find out the cause of your violence, which is such a waste of time. But to observe violence as it is, without the censor, who then separates himself from the fact that he is violent. Are we meeting each other? Are we communicating with each other? I'm not sure. Look, sirs, this is really very important to understand. So let's go into a little more. Let's suppose I'm violent. Anger, jealousy, brutality, driving ambition that brings about competition. And I'm always measuring myself against somebody else. And this comparison makes me feel I'm inferior to you who are superior. So there is a battle. Violence. I know all that. Then I say to myself, I must get rid of this. I want to live at peace. Though I've lived for thousands and thousands of years as a human being, there must be a change. There must be change in society. However rotten it is, and it is. So I'll plunge into social work and therefore forget myself. And the social work and the society is me. So I'm escaping from myself and realizing all the tricks the mind plays upon itself. Now I look at myself, I'm violent. And how do I look on that violence? As a censor who condemns violence or justifies violence, or one who is not capable of dealing with that violence, therefore escapes from it? How do I look at myself, look at that violence? Please do it. Are you looking at it as an observer who is different from violence? The observer who is separate, who condemns, justifies, and says this is right, this is, and so the observer looks at the violence, separates himself from violence and condemns it. Or is the observer the observed? You're following? The observer recognizes violence and separates himself in order to do something about it. But this separation is one of the tricks of thought. So the observer is the observed, is the violence. So long as there is a division between the observer and the observed, there must be violence. Right? So when I realize that, not verbally, realize with my heart, with my mind, with my whole being, then what takes place? You understand my question? You know, when you observe anything, there is always not only a physical separation, distance, space, there is also the desire to identify yourself with that which is beautiful, noble, and not identify yourself with that which is not. So identification is part of the trick. Of a mind that has separated itself as the sensor and is now trying to identify. But whereas, when the observer becomes aware that he is part of the observed, and he is, and therefore no image between the observer and the observed, then you will find that conflict completely comes to an end. This is real meditation. This is not just a trick. Therefore, it's very important, imperative, that one understand oneself. deeply. Understand all the responses, the conditioning, the various temperaments, characteristics, tendencies, just to watch without the observer. We are meeting now to observe without the observer. And that is the act of learning. And so that's the act, that is the action. Now, there is a difficulty in this. One is observing oneself. One wants to learn about oneself. The more you discover, the more you understand, the greater the freedom. I'm using the word more purposely for the moment. The more is a comparative evaluation. I want to understand myself, learn about myself. In observing myself, please do this as the speaker is going into it. Do it actually. Don't take it home and think about it. Do it now. This is not a group therapy or a confession or all that nonsense. But watch yourself as we are working together. I want to learn about myself. And myself is a living movement. Each desire contradicts the other. They're living, moving, they're vital. And I observe. And through that observation I've learned. With what I have learned, I am going to look next minute. Right? You follow this? I am going to look, observe with the knowledge which I have gathered through previous observation. Am I learning? Is there learning then? Because when the mind observes with an accumulated knowledge of its examination, from its examination, that knowledge is preventing perception. That knowledge is preventing the freedom to look, see the difficulty. So can the mind observe without accumulation? And the accumulation is the observer, is the sensor, is the conditioned entity. Therefore, to look without accumulating. That is, look. Someone flatters you, says how nice you are, how beautiful you are, how very intelligent, or how stupid you are. Now, can you listen to what he is saying that you are stupid or very clever or very this or very that? Can you listen without accumulation? That is, without accumulating the insult or the flattery. Because if you listen with accumulation, then he becomes your enemy or your friend. Therefore, that listening and how you listen creates the image. Right? And that image separates. And that image is the cause of conflict. The image that you have about the communist and the bourgeois. The image you have about the Catholic, if you are a Protestant. And the Catholic has the image about the Protestant. The image you have about your husband or your wife or your boy or whatever it is. You believe and another does not believe. So there is contradiction. So can you observe without separation? Can you observe at the moment of violence, at the moment of your anger, without the censor? See how difficult it becomes if you're not aware at that moment. If you're not aware at that moment, you've already created the image. So to observe the cloud, the beauty of it, the light of it, to observe the lovely hills in this country, to observe the light on the water, just to observe without naming it. Because that the naming, the knowledge, the experience prevents the mind from observing totally. So when the mind can look without the observer, all fragments come to an end in oneself. And this is really very important to grasp, to understand. And this cannot be taught by another.